Welcome to the Canna Conversations blogcast, part video blog, part podcast, aimed to bridge the gap between the cannabis industry and the patients it serves. Join the ladies of Midwest Canna Concierge as they bring everyone to the table, from cultivation experts and dispensary staff to lawyers, doctors, and medical marijuana patients, to have open conversations around all things cannabis related.
All right, everybody. So welcome to Canna Conversations. I'm Amanda, and that's Danielle. And we've got a special guest today, Steve Miller. And so I've known Steve for a very long time, and he's a wonderful guy and a great advocate for the medical marijuana community. So Steve, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Like, what was your entry into the cannabis world?
Well, I'm a retired police officer. I retired as a sergeant from the Canton Township Police Department in Michigan. I also worked for the City of Milan Police Department for a couple of years prior to that. And before that, I was in the Air Force Security Police thing. So just under 25 years law enforcement, police, military experience. I retired in 2013, November of 2013. So I'm getting near my retirement anniversary, I guess, 8 years. And I retired due to some health issues I was having. And I, through that, discovered cannabis that helped me with those issues. And in combination with my friend, attorney Michael Kormorn, who I've known a long time, probably more than 25 years. We met a long time ago. He was a young defense attorney. I was a young detective. We had a case in common that was not related to marijuana. It was an assault case. And Michael and I became friends over the course of that case. And when I retired, I got my private investigator's license and called Michael and just to let him know if he needed an investigator for something, that please give me a call. And at that time, Michael got me involved with into the advocacy part of things. And he got me connected with LEAP, which at the time was Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. And they've since changed their name to Law Enforcement Action Partnership, as they wanted to have a broader view of criminal justice reform, more than just focusing on the war on drugs.
Awesome.
So I got, Michael turned me on to LEAP. I became a speaker for them. And slowly but surely, I became ingrained into the community and as an advocate and speaking at legalization events and other things. And here I am today. I'm working in the law office now at Kormorn Law. So we're actively on the fight every day. I mean, we were discussing earlier, we have a case down in downtown Detroit in the Wayne County court system, and we are getting ready to set up a Section 4 and Section 8 defenses in the matter.
So for those people that may not know what Section 4 and Section 8 is, what is that? What does that mean? Like, what is that defense?
So Section 4 of the Medical Marijuana Act, Michigan Medical Marijuana Act, refers to immunity, and that patients are to have immunity in regards to, their possession and use of medical marijuana. And Section 8 concerns the volume limitations prescribed to people. And for instance, I want to try and describe the Section 8 in terms regular people can understand. lawyers. Look at
Yes,
it
because I'm in Ohio, so I'm very new to, I don't know anything about this. So please do dumb it down for me, because I'm not a legal. I am not a legal.
No
So
legalese.
Section 8 and regular terms is simply like we would take, say, a caregiver gets raided and charged. That's the case we have. It's a medical marijuana caregiver. The case is from 2018, I think. Anyway, so we have a caregiver, medical marijuana caregiver, raided. His home was raided due to, they said he was out of compliance with the Medical Marijuana Act, they just said that he was illegal. And he does have bona fide medical marijuana defenses. He has patients. So under Section 8, we get his patient list, and we have the patients all sign waivers, and we get their medical marijuana records from the state and their registration. We get their medical records from their certifying physicians and their regular doctors even. And we build files. We build these big files of Section 8 files, and we present those to the prosecutor, the judge, in a motion, in a Section 8 motion to say, John has 5 patients. He's entitled to grow 72 plants. He has this much usable material because patient A requires this much oil, and it takes this much plant material after you process it, to make this much oil to provide for this patient, so if somebody is outside of their, 2.5 ounces they're supposed to have, or 15 ounces for a caregiver with 5 patients, then that can be explained in a Section 8 defense as, we're breaking the material down to make Rick Simpson oil for this patient who requires this much oil each day. So that's a Section 8 defense simplified. Section 4 speaks to volume limitations as well, and immunity. And so if I'm trying to think of how to explain the Section 4 in a more.
So like a patient can't get in trouble if they're trying to obtain cannabis from a source, perhaps not quite a licensed facility.
Absolutely.
But maybe
a
just
patient can acquire from wherever they want to acquire.
And they're not going to get in trouble for it.
They shouldn't.
Okay. But what I'm hearing.
We've seen cases here in Michigan where they are. What's it like in Ohio?
That's a whole other. Oh boy. I have a question about this before I go into Ohio. So do you think though that's a disconnect in law enforcement? Like, do you think law enforcement is just taking things too far?
Yes, they always have.
Where's the disconnect?
Yeah, like who's not understanding the rules here?
It's the police.
Yeah.
And Michael is he will often ask the police officers when he gets them on the stand, and these are narcotics trained officers, and ask them if they've ever been trained in the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act, and their response is generally no, or they may have seen some sort of a legal update from the state police bulletin about it a little bit. And then he follows up with, well, have you ever read the act? And their answer is generally no. Or, well, I've read it a little bit, or not.
Well, I've skimmed it.
It's the police that don't understand the law, and that was in combination with an attorney general we had in the state, Bill Schuette, who his interpretation of everything, and that his interpretation goes out to all the police agencies as, the standard by which they are going to perform their duties. Mm-hmm. His word is law, and he came out with the opinion that anything outside of the scope of the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act is deemed a felony, and their homes and facilities will be raided, and we're going to take their stuff, and they're going to be charged with the felony. And that was the direction he gave to the police. And outside of the scope of the law can be subject to whatever their interpretation wants to be.
Yeah. Okay. So I asked her before we got on this call, I asked Amanda if this was something that I could bring up, because knowing your background.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Just to give you an idea of what things are like legally here in Ohio, for patients. I previously worked in a dispensary here in Ohio.
Mhm.
I am a licensed card holder as a patient myself. We don't have, our caregivers are only able to like pick up medicine on behalf of patients. We don't have home grows, and we don't have caregivers like Michigan has caregivers. But I worked in a dispensary, and we didn't receive, there are no discounts, there are no tips, there are no breaks for dispensary employees at all. Anything that we try there is purchased on our own behalf as a patient, full price. So I was in a position, we had gotten edibles, these caramel edibles, and they were a 1-to-1 edible. They were $60 for the bottle of 10. And I made the comment to 2 coworkers, I would love to try them, but I can't afford $60, not knowing what the effect, like how they affect me. I don't want to commit $60 of my weekly budget or whatever it was to not knowing if they worked. And so one of my coworkers had pulled me aside quietly. She was also a patient. I am a patient, and said, hey, I was going to get them for myself. I'll gladly give you one after work off hours for you to try. And that's how it went. Nothing was exchanged at work, because in the state of Ohio, there is no open anything on the premises. At a dispensary, everything's prepackaged, and patients sign a consent form that say they won't open anything on the site. And so we did this after hours off site, not even related to work. Fast forward 2 months later, and I almost forgot about it. Fast forward 2 months later, I was put in a position where the state inspector, who was a former narcotics officer, sat me down. Amongst a crazy situation that was going on at the store, he showed up spontaneously to interview everybody that was working that day. And I was put in a room with him. I was the last one of the day. I was the first one there in the morning and last one there to interview with him that night. And I was put in a room with him and interviewed, which was made to feel like an interrogation, and asked if I had any knowledge about medicine sharing, and whether I knew about anybody sharing pens or anything at the store. And he basically led me into a corner, making me feel as though he already knew the information. And in my mind, one-to-one edible is nothing like that. And it wasn't even done at work or anything like that. But I am also a horrible liar. My face just gives it away. I don't do that. I'm not a dishonest person. So I just answered, and I shared that I had received an edible, like this one single edible. He made me give a written statement and sign it. I did not get a copy of it. He then took it with him and said, I appreciate your honesty, and the board will appreciate your honesty, but ultimately you're putting your own badge at risk. I said, I understand that, but in my mind, honesty is the best policy. And you're in the eyes of science, because he made a comment to me saying, in the eyes of the law, it's like she gave you a Percocet. And I said, but in the eyes of science, it's not even close. And I said, we are both patients. We both have access to it. I simply could not afford $60. And it was just this one single one. And he said,
equal to a Percocet?
Yeah. A 1-to-1, 10, I think it was 10 milligrams, or it was like 9
CBD to
something.
THC?
Yeah.
So equal ratio.
Yeah. And so then I spent the next 2 weeks in a limbo where I didn't know what was happening. And then one day I showed up at work and I got a phone call from that inspector saying the board has ruled to suspend my license and I had to leave immediately.
Wow.
I had to turn in my badge and leave immediately, and pending a hearing. I then received, it took an entire week for me to receive the certified letter in the mail stating that they had suspended my license, which was dated like 4 days after that initial call. So I could have worked those 4 shifts that I was scheduled for. And so they had ruled me out of that. I had to obtain a lawyer to fight or to request this hearing. And then he went back and forth with them a couple times trying to get it lifted for time served or like a slap on the wrist or whatever. And they said no. And then I had written a letter to them for as my part in this hearing or whatever was taking place. And I'm not sure that anybody on the board actually read it. I know that their lawyer read it because he had made a comment to my coworker who was also in trouble for doing this, that he was going to recommend to them that I was off with time served. And they ultimately came down and said, no, you're out for a year. Like, you're out for a year, no pay.
That's how the law is in
So
Ohio.
that's Ohio.
I'm
So
surprised they
Danielle-
didn't criminally charge it with something.
Well, my lawyer literally,
One
when I handed my lawyer the letter and he read it and I told him the story, he laughed and said, no court would hold this. No, this would not hold up in any court.
Wow, that's crazy.
Amazing. In
So it's
this
pretty
day and
tight
age,
there.
So
Where
it's pretty rough. And
it's-
mind you, this was, so we opened the store in 2019. This all came down January 2020, and then we went into a pandemic. So it's been interesting. But yes, that's what regulations are like here in Ohio right now.
Wow.
so Steve, let's transition into you with having such a law enforcement background and of course working in an attorney's office right now, which Michael, maybe we could have him on the show and talk about in more detail like the Michigan licensing process and such.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Yeah, but anyways, so how does that transition? So how did this all happen?
I want to know how you switch that mindset, because you would have been in law enforcement right in like prime crackdown on like war on drugs and
Right.
all of that. So how do you switch that mentality?
Well, it was easy with marijuana because I already knew that marijuana really wasn't a dangerous drug and it wasn't causing problems in the community. And we weren't getting dispatched to calls in which marijuana was the source behind the problem. Generally, alcohol is often the source behind the problem that requires a police response because people start acting violent and disorderly and things like that. And it's always alcohol. And it's funny because I was reading something the other day. Oh, it was from it was some propaganda material from some rehabilitation type network, and they they were talking about this individual that had a problem. They had substance abuse problem they talked about. And then they went into and they talked about he had a problem with alcohol and that he had a problem with alcohol and marijuana. They had to sneak it in there.
That devil's
lettuce.
lettuce.
The rest of the material talks about his problem with alcohol. It never mentions marijuana again, but they had to, it's like they always got to sneak it in. It's always borne the face of the, with the war on drugs and, marijuana is the easy thing. It's the easy target, but it's the least harmless. But it was the key for police to get in vehicles. and search vehicles. And, you know, like I said, I didn't respond to a call because marijuana was the problem. I may have responded to calls in which there was the smell of marijuana, but it was never the problem. That was quite evident. And it was evident early on in my career. And, you know, I arrested people for it. I mean,
if I think there was still what was training like, or what were the orders like coming down for marijuana offenses
well, it was against the law. And when we came across it, we were to, you know, confiscate it and make an arrest.
Mm-hmm. But there wasn't necessarily like pushes for it, or you weren't like going out seeking it, I guess.
You know, some officers did. You know, my thing, I wasn't out specifically hunting it down, looking for it on the street. But if I pulled over a car and I could smell marijuana in it, I was going to be pulling everybody out of that car and doing a search of the vehicle. And if I found marijuana, I would arrest them for the marijuana. Gotcha. Now, today, the cops up here in Michigan if they smell marijuana in a car, they're more likely now going to take you for driving under the influence of marijuana, which is another topic in and of itself.
Yeah, I would love to touch on that.
That's a big one right now.
Yeah, I was going to say
that's a big one in Michigan specifically.
Yeah, I see all the buzz driving is drunk driving or something. So.
Yeah.
Whatever they say.
But, you know, the training coming up, you know, was, you know, we had a prescribed method on the way we did traffic stops. And if you ever get pulled over, you may experience some of this. Because they're going to come up and they got a thing they're going to. Yeah.
Can you walk us through that? What should people do? How do you handle that?
You know, they're going to come up. Hello, ma'am. How are you today? I'm Officer Miller from the Canton Police Department. And the reason I stopped you today is because you have your license plate light was out. And that's some of the things they'll pull you over for. Mm-hmm. Cracked windshield, license plate light out, tail light not working, brake lights not working, cracked windshield, if I didn't say that. You know, anything. We were trained that the motor vehicle code really wasn't about the motoring safety of the public. It was your reason to stop.
I feel like I have a master's degree in criminal justice. So I feel like there was almost even a bit like that was just like, okay, well, somebody who's likely to neglect this kind of care on their car
mm-hmm.
is likely to be into some other things. So right. Let's check it out.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that was what the trainers would, you know, my field training officers would tell me. If they're not taking care of that light, then they probably haven't taken care of another ticket, which is going to, you know, cause their license to be suspended. And if they have a suspended license, then they might have warrants for driving on a suspended license, and because they didn't take care of this light, they didn't take care of all these tickets. Right. And they're probably suspended with warrants. And that was the case. You know, people get in that trap where they get the ticket, get suspended, can't
But that's pay. Exactly what it is, though, a trap.
Yeah, for sure.
I used to look at people's driving records and they were, you know, suspended so many times. It's like, there's no possible way this guy could get out of this hole. But, you know, I had my orders. I was out there doing my job. And, you know, unfortunately, the majority of my arrests as a police officer and 20 years of police work was suspended drivers, possession of marijuana, drunk drivers, followed probably by domestic violence or assault crimes.
Which were probably most likely alcohol related.
Retail frauds. And the cause of a lot of the retail frauds are, theft from a store. You know, a lot of people addicted to heroin would go to the local Meijer or Super Kmart we had in town and steal stuff. And I would see, you know, you'd bring them in and You could tell they were already starting to get their jitters and, start going through the withdrawals. And it's like, you tell the people working in jail, let me know when we got to take this one to the hospital, because you have to go, because you don't want them dying in the lockup,
Right. I don't know if either of you have seen, Hulu has a show right now called Dope Sick. And
yes, I've been wanting to watch that.
Oh my gosh. I had a cousin in 2017. I had a cousin die of an overdose, and it blew me away. When I got the call, it blew me away because I had only ever known him to use marijuana. And I straight up said, you can't OD on weed. Like, what do you mean he OD'd? And then to watch how on Dope Sick, this company that produced Oxycontin, and the blind eye that they just continuously turned, and the falsified information that they put out there, and then seeing how like these small towns are impacted by this opioid crisis, and how these young people are dying, and just like how that trap swallows people. And it's pretty eye-opening.
Right. And and marijuana can help people out of the,
yes,
to give them another option to deal with their pain and help them get off of these opiates. And I was seeing, and in the few years before I retired, it was fentanyl was hitting the drug scene. They were cutting it with the heroin. And, those were my experiences of watching the Narcan
right
at work. There was one guy in a trailer park. I think we were at his place, 4 or 5 times over the course of a, 3-4 week period, where he had overdosed, was dead.
Wow.
And Narcan, and boop, he, sits right up. I mean, you literally see somebody come back to life.
Yeah. We actually had an OD.
They're still in my head from 10 years or so later,
It's insane. And we had at the dispensary, actually, it wasn't a patient of ours, but this one day we were right up on near the road. And one day this car just kind of coasted up into our driveway, and to the point it almost ran into like a building sign for another thing, but they just like stopped, turns out, and both passengers fled. And turns out the driver was ODing in the driveway of a cannabis dispensary. And I was like, oh God.
Yeah. Again,
not what we need, but again, this could have been avoided.
So yeah, officers have their prescribed way they do their stops, and it's going to go like I always divide officers into 3 categories. And this is by no scientific method at all. This is by my own opinion and working with police officers, and maybe they've changed, but about a third of the officers, they're out there to get their required tickets in or traffic contacts, and take their complaints, write their reports, and be done for the day. And if arrest comes out of that, it comes out of that. But they're just there to, they're not digging or hunting, or, they don't care what's in your car. They just want to get their tickets in, keep the boss off their back, and go home. Now, if they stumble across something that's obvious, yeah, they're going to act. But then you have, officers, and I put myself in this category. I was out there digging a bit for things. I wanted to make arrests and, show everybody how great I was. And so I would come up to the car, and I'm Officer Miller. And the reason I stopped you today was for speeding. Do you have anything in the car you shouldn't have? Any drugs, bombs, alcohol, any things like that? And to which somebody would respond, oh, no, and then, well, do you mind if I take a look? Then, I mean, it throws that person.
There it is.
Then you're on the spot.
There it is. It's like, okay. So
but can you refuse?
So I'm going to be I'm the nice guy, right?
Yeah.
I'm the officer you got to watch out for. I'm the nice guy. I'm going to use my niceness and ability to deal with people and make you think everything's okay. Yes, that is exactly what happened to you. And yes, you can refuse. And that's what we tell people. No, you can't look in my car. why not? If you don't have anything in there, why would you care if I looked? You start getting into this back and forth, and the person with the gun and badge on and who has you pulled
absolutely over, they have yeah.
I mean,
who are you going to listen to?
Totally intimidated.
Sure.
Totally intimidating situation.
At that point I probably would have been crying.
And they start using mental tricks and niceness and all these tricks and the trade we learn in interview schools and what to do when you stop people. And we did what we had to do to get in cars. And when you get in cars, that's when you find stuff. And a lot of times
do you think that that's changed now? Like, I know that you've been retired for a few years now, but do you think that, like, police coming up now, do you think that training has changed? Like, I know that in theory, and I see it on TV shows all the time, there's supposedly a more mental health focused approach to police interactions and trying to, I guess, be a little bit more community friendly instead of prying. I don't know how to say that, but do you think
right? I don't know what they're doing now.
Yeah.
I did have the opportunity in the past a year or so ago, maybe less than that. I talked to the chief of my old department, and he was a guy we came up together. We hired in right around the same time. We were friends, and I hadn't talked to him for a while. And he told me they've pretty much come to a hands-off approach with concerning marijuana.
Okay. Now, even with the 18 to 21s, what do you think about that? Because in Michigan, there's adult use, which would be 21 and over.
Right?
So anybody within that falls into a different category, or up to them?
That would be up to probably, officer discretion of how they deal with those situations. In the department I worked at, they're going to have not a policy, but probably an attitude towards, if we find underage people with marijuana, we are going to ticket them.
Now, do you think it matters? Does that matter if they have a patient card?
Well, it should. And I haven't heard of any cases, since legalization took place where you have somebody that's 18 years old with a medical card. I haven't seen that case come across. I'm sure there's one. There's probably officers out there that say, what do you need a medical card for? This is bullshit. I'm giving you this ticket anyway. You go to court and prove that you need this card, or that you need this card. And, we haven't come across any of those yet as cases in this office. So
we have had it here in Ohio, and I only know it because when I was working in the dispensary, I had a patient that he was a regular. I worked with him all the time, and he needed me to print off a certain report for his lawyer to present and he wasn't, I don't think he was even necessarily involved in, I don't think what his offense was related to cannabis, but he had to prove that he was a patient. And now that I work for a doctor's office, providing any information outside of their card and what's available to them as a patient, that's a HIPAA violation. And so that's a whole other can of worms that opens up for presenting that information to a court.
Right.
Yeah, and it really sucks.
That's where we come in, where I was talking about earlier, the Section 8 defense. What I'm going to have to do for this client today, I haven't had to do one of these for a while, but he'll sign a waiver, or he'll sign off on the release. State has a prescribed form that we can access all of his patient records. So the patient signs off on that. And then we have the patient sign off on the HIPAA release that we then send to his doctor and certifying physician. And that's how we get those records. So it's on the burden of the defense to prove that we have immunity and
what do you think they're looking for, in their records? What do you think the court will be looking for in those records to justify?
the biggest thing is they want to see the bona fide patient-doctor relationship.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that was one of the things we always wanted to make sure we had in the file was in their certification paperwork that there was a follow-up, they actually, an examination form that they filled out, made some notes, and then, have the, patient to be seen in 1 year, follow up to see how everything's doing. That's how we get all that stuff into the court and before the judge, so the judge can see, yes, okay, there is a bona fide doctor-patient relationship here.
Gotcha.
We had a case on the west side of the state. The gentleman, literally the cop pulled the trick of, I'm going to take and this is a trick the cops do. They used to, I don't know if they're doing it anymore because especially in Michigan, they might be in Ohio, is they take like the plastic, an ID card or a credit card or something, and they'll scrape the floorboard of the vehicle.
What?
And they'll collect
residue.
The shake.
Oh, come on.
This guy, the cop, was able to scrape up a 0.5 gram on this guy and charged him with the possession of marijuana.
Wow. First of all, why are you leaving that much on the floor of your car?
Well, it's really not even a lot.
No, well, okay. Well, I'm coming from Ohio, where that's a lot. That's a measurable amount. But
I knew guys that used to do that trick. I knew it. I mean,
wow.
They did it. And I mean, I never did that trick. I can honestly say I would never go scrape up shake from a floor. I wasn't that desperate for an arrest.
No, do you know
I was active enough that I would go find something else, But we ended up, we got the certifying physician to come in, and we don't have to do that a lot. Usually the court will accept the records as official records. But we had the doctor come in this case, and this guy hadn't been able, and he had conditions. He had been in a bad car wreck, and he had problems with his back and his knee. And so since this case hit him, he was, put on bond, and the bond conditions said you're not allowed to use medical marijuana while on bond. And so we had the physician
that they can't use medical marijuana. It's not just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
You'd rather him be on narcotics?
Yes, they would. That's exactly it. They want you to get a regular prescription from the doctor, opiates.
The court's not a broken system.
It is. It's hugely broken. So this doctor gave this compelling testimony. I mean, it was really good. And, and that's what it took to get this judge to realize, yes, this is a real thing. Because law enforcement's been convincing everybody for all these years that this medical marijuana is bullshit. And it's just these marijuana addicts' foot in the door to get their legalization. And it took, in the western side of the state, it's pretty highly conservative. I think they call themselves Dutch Reform Christians or something. And they, their marijuana is the devil's lettuce and all of that. And, but it took this doctor's testimony convinced this judge that, yes, this is a thing and this guy needs it. And,
that's what we need, more people like him, though, that will come up and put it in front of them, lay out the science.
Yeah. And we won the case, and the guy was then, able to start using medical marijuana again. And he's like, oh, he's been hurting for months because he stayed by the order of the court.
Good props to him.
Yeah. Tell us, no kidding. Tell us about your first experience with cannabis.
Yeah, had you used prior to your retirement? Had you ever been a cannabis consumer?
I knew people who did it, and I knew nobody was going and jumping off of buildings or doing crazy, so you kind of learn growing up in high school, and it's like, well, it's illegal, but I'm not seeing, you're in your back of your mind, where's the inherent dangers here? Where's the, the brain frying in the, when they put the egg in the pan and they're,
how do you melting into couches and stuff?
And, so that little bit. And then, of course, I went in the military right after high school, and I didn't fool with anything but, alcohol and whatever was prescribed to me or whatever. And, I had a career mindset, and I wasn't going to fool with anything that was going to screw that up. And, so that was it. And then until I retired, it's a couple months after I retired, and, I had some neck and back issues, and I've actually had, a C-spine fusion surgery, and, they had me on the opiates.
I know that routine well.
And I was,
of course they did.
I was probably heading down a bad path with, what they were prescribing me. I wasn't trying to go out and get extra or anything, but I was starting to
But you knew, you could sense that you could get there.
Right.
Yeah, probably the next step.
That's where I was when I found cannabis.
And, some friends of mine had some, and, I tried it with them, and I was like, well, works way better than these opiates, and I feel much better, and I feel like I can function and do things, and
feel okay the following day, and sometimes a sense of well-being.
You could show up for what you were doing. And...
Absolutely. It was like, wow, I could go back to police work. I mean, that was my thought. It's like, wow, this is real relief, and I can function. Yeah. And, shortly after that, I figured out, I navigated through the medical marijuana system here. And I was just getting in touch with Michael and these guys, but I went and found my own little certification clinic, was up in Flint, and got my card and figured out where there was some dispensaries, which were operating in a very gray area at the time. Amanda knows about that a little bit.
Yes, and Bill Schutte as well.
And and I figured my way. I started figuring things out where I can acquire product, and I was I kind of was looking more towards the medibles aspect of things, and because I didn't want to go around smelling like marijuana. I didn't want to have that stigma. And I had people in my life that didn't care for the smell of marijuana either. I was looking at medibles, but I was looking at medibles before because I was seeing them as more medicinal than just the standard smoking. And I found my places where I could go, find capsules that worked for me and different things. And that's how I, stumbled into finding good medicine.
Yeah.
And
so you mentioned like capsules and stuff. Is that RSO?
I think the initial ones I found were just THC capsules.
Yeah. I got some from Ann Arbor several years ago, and this was well before I really understood the endocannabinoid system. And they were like, I think they were like 50 milligrams a capsule or something like that. And I had no idea what
that was a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot to take when you don't know the product.
No right. And I mean, the packaging then, granted, I wasn't at a position I wouldn't even have known what I was looking at, but the packaging didn't really include any information.
No.
Yeah. But even if it does, like what I've noticed with edibles specifically is that when you're trying a new edible, they can both be 100 milligrams, 100 and 100. but each of them, I don't know why, but they just feel different. Like the dosing, you eat what you would normally, like, let's say 50 milligrams. You eat a brownie with 50 milligrams, but it's going to affect you differently than if you were to eat 50 milligrams of this gummy.
Yes.
I agree. Like as far as levels. So when you're starting because a new one,
about which strain, it's not just about the milligrams, it's about all the other pieces that came in with it.
Right. And, I had found like these low dose capsules early on. Like I found them, they came in 5 and 10 milligrams. And that was like a perfect dose for me at that time. If I could find the 5 milligram ones, that was perfect for me at that time. And the 10 milligrams could be a little much, and then I stumbled onto the Rick Simpson oil and found some real healing after that. And I've pretty much stuck with that as my regimen ever since. And that works for me.
Yeah, I like the Rick Simpson oil too. It's more like a full spectrum type of thing.
Yeah, just overall helps me feel just overall good.
Yeah, absolutely. So what has been, like, you mentioned some of the people in your circle were not like too keen on the whole cannabis thing, or at least the smell of it. Mm-hmm. So what did you do to, like, I don't know, other than, maybe transitioning to edibles, but what other things did you have to do with conversations, maybe with people who weren't quite as on board with the cannabis scene?
Well, it was tough at first because early on, I wasn't as well versed in things and didn't know how to explain things and describe, how this works and why this medicine works for me. And it was just early on, you just knew it did. And it was better than what the system was offering me. And, I was trying to get that point across to those loved ones bluntly, which doesn't work, and, so it took some time for me and the others to kind of figure it all out. And, everybody in my life's all good with it now. So, but early on, it's tough. It's tough trying to explain something to somebody that works, but you're not really quite in full understanding of why it works at this point.
Right. We're helping them to break the beliefs, because you're experiencing that relief yourself, but for them they are not experiencing it firsthand. So they're trying to break all this ingrained belief that we've all been taught for years.
I mean, and it's, I think he's totally against it now because, I think he always just saw it as a party drug. In his teen years, they'd go out drinking and smoking pot and getting all, party down, messed up. And so even though he had tried it and used it, and at least, he just carried on in his, adult years with him that's people are just using this for partying like I did.
Before we let you go, because we'll have to jump off here soon, but I wanted to ask your opinion. So I get this question a lot from patients about not wanting to get their medical card because they want to get their CCW, or they want to have be able to have their CCW, and they're concerned about how because in Ohio that's written into the law that you can't have your medical card and have your CCW.
Wow.
From what I've been told, it's word of, like, they go on your word. I don't know what that process looks like. And I was curious if you've had experience.
Well,
that's a big one.
It's a sticky, ugly area right now because federally, cannabis is a Schedule I controlled substance, dangerous drug. And to even go buy a firearm, whether you're in Ohio or Michigan, you go to the firearm store and So you just want to buy a long gun, a shotgun or a rifle or something. It says right on this paper, on the thing, if you're an illicit substance user, and then it qualifies, even if you're in a state that allows medical marijuana or recreational marijuana, this is still considered a federally illicit controlled substance. And if you're a user of these, whether medically or otherwise, you can't purchase this firearm. It says it, so it goes off your word. But if if they can prove you're lying on that form, you're guilty of a felony.
Oh, okay. So it's really.
And that's just federal. I mean, it doesn't even matter what the state laws say at that time. Because, even in Michigan, it's still a Schedule I controlled substance, dangerous drug in the state of Michigan on the Michigan controlled substances list.
But we can down a 12-pack and have our our guns on us.
Opiates with a shot and 3 beers and
go shoot some barrels in the backyard.
Right.
We were actually I was with Michael, and Steve was there as well at the judiciary hearing for the forfeiture bill.
Yeah.
The House Judiciary hearing. And one of the state police was up there giving her testimony. And she said something about if I had a person and they had, a kilo of cocaine or an ounce of marijuana, I'm going with the marijuana. Meaning that if she had a choice of who to arrest, she would arrest the marijuana user based on its scheduling, because I if I'm not mistaken, cocaine is on a different schedule, isn't it?
I think so. I think it might
be a 2.
Yeah,
Schedule 2. Yeah.
Yeah. So she's like, okay, marijuana.
Scheduled 1.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
What's that?
I didn't know that.
Percocets are scheduled 1.
Are they? Huh.
According to the state of Ohio state investigator, they are.
Well, that doesn't make sense then, because schedule is no medical use.
Right. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Oh, these bureaucrats, they're so funny. They got so much stuff to swift to and intertwined, and
and it's so much stuff because it all comes down to who's making the money where.
Yeah, it is. Everything's about the dollar.
It blows me away.
Not about what's right, but.
Steve, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us.
No problem.
And we'll have to have Michael on one of our upcoming chats.
Yep, absolutely.
I'll talk with you about
I'll have to nail down a day on the schedule we can get them.
Yeah, and I'll have to come back. We'll have to, Amanda, we can plan a day that either myself and Kelsey or just I can come back on Green Trees.
Absolutely. We love to have you guys.
Yeah, that was fun. I always enjoy that show. So.
Yeah, we like having you guys.
All right. Well, thank you again.
All right, you guys have a good day.
Thanks, you too.
See ya.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to this Canna Conversation. To learn more, please follow us on Instagram at Midwest_Canna Concierge. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen, so other Canna curious folk can find us. We really appreciate your support.